What happens when the world's largest proven oil reserves suddenly fall under the shadow of foreign control and the country that owns them no longer decides its own future? Venezuela is now living that question in real time, and the answer will reshape energy markets, regional power balances, and how regime change actually works in the 21st century. With one speech, one arrest, and one quiet realignment in Washington, a country of 28 million people has entered a new geopolitical experiment whose outcome no one can yet predict. If this transition succeeds, Venezuela could re-enter global markets after years of isolation, altering oil prices, investment flows, and diplomatic norms. If it fails, the country risks freezing into a managed dependency where sovereignty exists mostly on paper. And if it escalates, the consequences would ripple far beyond Latin America, touching supply chains, sanctions regimes, and great power competition across multiple regions. To understand how Venezuela reached this moment, you have to go back more than 2 decades. In 1999, Hugo Chavez reshaped the state around oil nationalism, redirecting petroleum revenue towards social programs while hollowing out institutions. By the time Nicolás Maduro inherited power in 2013, oil production had already begun its steep decline. Venezuela pumped more than 3 million barrels per day at the start of the century. By 2020, output had collapsed below 400,000 barrels per day due to mismanagement, sanctions, and infrastructure decay. The United States imposed broad oil sanctions in 2019, cutting Venezuela off from its largest market and blocking access to capital and technology. Those measures accelerated economic contraction. Between 2013 and 2021, Venezuela's GDP shrank by more than 75%. Inflation reached 7-digit levels at its peak. Hospitals deteriorated, electricity grids failed, and millions left the country. The political stalemate hardened after disputed elections in 2018 and again in 2024. While opposition leader Maria Corina Machado claimed victory in the latest vote, the state retained control of institutions and security forces. That balance collapsed abruptly this month when U.S. forces detained Maduro in Caracas and transferred him to New York to face long-standing narcotics charges. Within days, Delcy Rodríguez, his former vice president, was recognized by Washington as acting president. Her first address to the National Assembly lasted just 44 minutes, a striking contrast to the marathon speeches of the past. The tone mattered as much as the content. She signaled continuity in political authority while offering a sharp pivot on economics. For the first time, a leader from within the Chavista system openly called for foreign firms to gain structured access to Venezuela's oil sector. The numbers explain why. Venezuela still holds roughly 303 billion barrels of proven crude reserves, the largest in the world. Yet production today hovers around 800,000 barrels per day, less than a third of what it was 2 decades ago. Reviving even half of former capacity would require tens of billions of dollars in investment, advanced drilling technology, and stable export channels. None of that is possible without U.S. approval. Washington's position is explicit. The Trump administration has stated that future Venezuelan oil revenues will be overseen to ensure they benefit public services rather than political elites. Under the proposed framework, proceeds would flow into 2 sovereign funds, one focused on healthcare and another on infrastructure. This model mirrors arrangements previously attempted in post-conflict states but rarely applied to a major oil producer in the Western Hemisphere. Rodríguez is attempting to balance 3 audiences at once. To Washington, she presents herself as cooperative and pragmatic. To foreign investors, she promises legal reforms and predictable access. To domestic power brokers, she emphasizes sovereignty, continuity, and respect for Maduro, whose image still looms over public spaces and state media. Meanwhile, the opposition finds itself sidelined. Machado met President Trump in Washington the same week Rodriguez addressed lawmakers in Caracas. She offered symbolic gestures and public optimism, but no formal endorsement followed. The US administration has instead engaged directly with Rodriguez, holding phone calls and initiating talks on reopening embassies. In practical terms, this means elections are no longer the immediate priority. Stability and oil flows are. This creates the first major what-if scenario. What if Venezuela becomes a managed energy state, where economic decisions are effectively outsourced while political structures remain intact? In that outcome, oil production could rise steadily over the next 3 to 5 years, easing pressure on global markets and lowering prices. For consumers, this would be welcome. For Venezuela, it would mean recovery without political renewal. The second scenario is more volatile. What if internal fractures emerge within the ruling coalition? Rodriguez lacks an independent power base comparable to Maduro's security apparatus. If factions resist reforms or perceive a loss of control, the transition could stall. In that case, foreign investment would hesitate, production gains would evaporate, and sanctions could snap back quickly. The geopolitical implications extend far beyond Caracas. For South Asia, increased Venezuelan supply could soften competition for Middle Eastern crude, stabilizing import costs for India and Pakistan. For the Middle East, a re-energized Venezuelan oil sector would slightly dilute OPEC's influence, particularly at a time when Gulf producers are managing delicate price ceilings. For Russia and Iran, both longtime partners of Caracas, the shift is uncomfortable. They lose strategic leverage and symbolic ground in the Western Hemisphere. State media in Venezuela continues to broadcast their criticisms of US actions, but materially, their role is shrinking. China, meanwhile, watches closely. It is owed more than $10 billion by Venezuela and has a stake in ensuring repayment without further instability. The United States faces its own risks. By assuming de facto responsibility for Venezuela's economic recovery, Washington becomes accountable for outcomes it does not fully control. If living conditions fail to improve quickly, resentment could grow, reinforcing narratives of external domination rather than partnership. On the streets of Caracas, uncertainty dominates. Security forces remain visible. Public protests are carefully managed. Many citizens avoid expressing opinions altogether. Those who do often describe a sense that decisions are now made elsewhere, beyond their reach. This moment is not a clean victory or a clean defeat for any side. It is an unresolved transition shaped by leverage, resources, and timing. The oil beneath Venezuela's soil has always been its greatest asset and its deepest vulnerability. Now, more than ever, it is also a bargaining chip in a global game.